couple of months later, my mom calls me in her room and she says, "You remember that camp you wanted to go to? Well, I'm going to take you to it. We're going to go to that camp." And I was elated. I'm going to a camp where Emmitt Smith, my idol, the person that I idolize, is going to be there. And I told my Mom, if I can just touch Emmett, if I can just shake his hand, I believe that I can do what he's done. And I get to the camp. This is no lie. This is how God works. The first day I'm at the camp, I'm in the dorm room, getting ready to go to dinner. I go around the corner to go upstairs. Emmitt Smith is coming down the stairs. He runs into me, almost knocks me over. He holds me up and he looks at me. He says, "Kid, you all right?" I said, "Oh my God, you're Emmitt Smith." I was elated and awe, but I touched him. And the confidence, the swagger that I got from just sizing this man up who just looked like an average man. He looked average, but it did so much for me. And fast forward, I went back home with the confidence that I can do anything because I had just met Emmitt Smith. That's the impact that I wanted to have when I did my camps. I was hoping that some kid would feel the same way about me and that I would, do wonders for this kid and their confidence, and then they will go on and soar to a place that they never imagined that they can go. So a lot of times that is the reason why you do camps, just to inspire kids to do something great.
Welcome to Black Philanthropy, our stories, where each episode spotlights awesome Black and African American leaders committed to transforming lives and communities through philanthropy. These authentic conversations will inspire, challenge, and remind you are not alone. Here's your host, award-winning writer, director, and founder of Samuel and Murray, Michelle Renee Jackson.
I am so grateful for you today, and I am so grateful to introduce our next guest today. Our next guest, of course, is the awesome, the amazing, the Hall of Famer of the NFL, the player that changed the game for the Chargers and for the NFL, of course, that is LaDainian LT Tomlinson. So, LT, we are so pleased for you to be with us today to share a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to and how you like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Michelle, well, first off, thank you for having me on. I'm so honored to be here and sharing a conversation with you today. I think the way I would introduce myself is, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I am a Pro Football Hall of Famer, but also I'm a humanitarian that cares about people in my community.
All of our guests are amazing. I'm so grateful to do this work. But I also will say that you're especially a special guest. And I would say that predominantly to acknowledge my dad. My dad is who this podcast is dedicated to. My father's name is Solomon Neal Jackson III, and he passed in May of last year, on May 20th, 2025. And I mention that because he was a long time, I think he spent 30 years in Bonita, California. So, and a long time NFL fan, and of course, a long time Chargers fan. And so I can only imagine how proud he must be to be able to have you a part of this conversation in a space where we're ultimately here to celebrate Black people. In the space of philanthropy, I will always say that my father was a philanthropist in many ways that the larger sector of philanthropy doesn't always acknowledge Black people as being philanthropists. And so for us who do this work in the space of philanthropy, we acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge that we come from enslaved people. We acknowledge that we honor our enslaved ancestors through the work that we do. That's at least how I come into the space of philanthropy predominantly as a fundraiser for all these years. But that's my own journey. But I wanted to also open it up to you, LT, to ask you, is there anyone that you honor, LT, or that you think about when you are doing the work of philanthropy?
Family comes to mind. My father is no longer with us. I lost him in 2007. And, I bear his last name. And that's very important to me. Uh, that legacy of carrying someone's last name, I don't take lightly. And I think experiencing what I experienced growing up in terms of being a part of a family that was very giving. My mother, I recall many days where she would take in kids at times, and kids throughout our life would stay with us for months upon time until they had another place to go. My mom's sister kind of spent her entire life raising other people's kids, kids that didn't have anywhere to go. She was a lady that dedicated her whole life to raising other people's kids. That's what I saw growing up. So imagine, Michelle, as a young kid, you're seeing the heart of people, true humanitarians. And I would say it's actually the heart of a servant. When we go back to thinking about, kind of God's impact on all of our lives, I remember my mom always saying, if you had enough, then you have something to give. She always reminded me of that. And so when I do my work, I want to honor my family. I want to honor my mother, my aunt. I want to honor my father for all the sacrifices that they have given to help people along the way. And no, we didn't have a lot. My parents wasn't raised with a lot, but they certainly, gave a lot. And when we talk about giving, a lot of times, Michelle, people think it's just monetary. It's not just money that you give. It's your time. It's your skill set. A lot of time, and time is the most precious gift that we have.
I think your mom, I want to acknowledge your mom, Lori, who's so amazing, who is the reason why we're together today. And she was so kind to accept a random outreach from me to see if there was any possibility that you might be able to be connected to this work. And so I just wanted to acknowledge your mom, Lori, for her own sense of time that she's been able to provide for us. But then I also wanted to ask you, LT, what's your father's name?
Oliver Terry Tomlinson.
Oliver. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. It's interesting, LT, one of the most common questions that's asked regarding philanthropy, people put the word philanthropy in Google on a daily basis, depending on the day that you're looking, and you look at the numbers. I do look at those numbers. It could be 40,000 people are asking. It could be 80,000, depending on the week, the day, the month, the year. And the biggest question that people are often asking associated with philanthropy is actually, what is it? And so I wanted to pass that question to you. LT, what do you think philanthropy is?
I think at the most basic root, when I think about philanthropy, for me, it is the love of my fellow man. It is that, that servant spirit that's within all of us to serve our fellow man. Again, I think that could be obviously money, time, skill set, resources, so many different things that you can put there in that description as philanthropy. But at the basic root, it is the love for our fellow man. And I just think about that's what makes us get up in the morning and want to go pass out dinners or lunches to people who can't afford to eat, or that's what makes us want to go out and fund scholarships, so people can be educated, or people who aspire to go on and be educated, they have that opportunity. That is fundamental root. That's to me what philanthropy means.
I wonder if there was an additional definition that you might have for Black philanthropy.
When you talk about systemic, problems that Black folks have had over the years, Black philanthropy to me means you identifying areas that are important to you to go back into your community to help people out of those situations. And I say that because I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And one of the things that we are so into is going back in our own community and creating programs to help our people through situations, social issues, and situations that they can't help themselves out of. And I'm so honored to be doing that work with my fraternity brothers. But beyond that, creating my own foundation, I know that it goes a step farther in being able to also raise the awareness of the issues that are going on, particularly in the Black community. So, that is kind of my job Michelle, it's funny because I think in my position as an athlete, who have been given, the celebrity kind of tag, being someone that is in the public eye, I think it's my job to raise the awareness, to use my brand to bring awareness to issues that are plaguing the Black community. So at the end of the day, Black philanthropy is very important to me. And I have to make sure, again, that I'm being a servant and being able to go back in my own community and serve the people that have helped raise me.
Many of our guests have talked about the history of philanthropy in our communities and that it's been there since slavery. It was there in Jim Crow, that the only reason that we're here where we are right now is because Black people have given and loved one another through their giving, through supporting one another. About $500 billion is donated through philanthropy each year. The number can be higher or lower, but for the most part, it sort of hovers around $500 billion. And that money is given predominantly through individuals. Next is foundations, and then after that is corporations. And so individual donors, foundations, corporations, as well as other entities are ultimately responsible for moving $500 billion to communities across the country and across the world. Interestingly enough, and this is the number that I find fascinating, is that Black people are the most philanthropic racial community in the US. And so of all the communities in the US, we give the most out of our own income, which is to say, percentage-wise, we give the most. But we also make the least. So we have the lowest median income in the country, but we also give the most out of our own income in our households. And I just find that so fascinating that the people who make the least are also the people who are the most philanthropic. And to me, it goes back to part of what you were talking about regarding your own family, regarding my own family. And I just wanted to see what you made of that the communities, Black communities that ultimately are earning the least in the US, but are also the most philanthropic. Does that feel surprising to you?
It does not. And the reason I say that, Michelle, is because it is truly a part of the innate spirit that's in Black folks. As you mentioned, from the time of our ancestors coming to this country, think about what we have done. We have served in every capacity. We have served, meals. We have served in terms of building infrastructure in this country. And so innately, who do we get it from? Our ancestors. That's who we saw building and giving so much. But that giving went beyond just the giving of, obviously, as slaves. I'm talking about the giving of when they had kids and they they built that community of sense of belonging with each other. And I think another foundation of belonging is what has been built in the church.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, I think that is a part of the foundation of who we are as people. So when you talk about giving, I'm not surprised at all that Black folks kind of lead the charge in that, even though, as you mentioned, we're one of the lowest, income gaining folks in this country. I think it just speaks to the heart of who we are, but also when we talk about being Christian-like, You look to Black folks a lot of times as being, godlike, or those Christian, having that Christian spirit of giving and then not expecting to get anything in return.
I went to Harvard Divinity School and I got my MDiv. And one of the things that I also learned through my studies there, Black people, they're also the most faith-based. And so, again, not surprising that Black people have the greatest representation within faith and faith expression across the country. But then also there's that correlation between, well, one, there's a faith expression, a belief, predominantly Christian belief, but not always, of course. And then also that I desire to give and to be able to support one another through that giving. You come into this space as a philanthropist. As well. And so can you share a little bit more about your foundation that you and your family have, and what was ultimately the desire or the catalyst for you starting the foundation?
The reason why we decided to start a foundation is to simply have an impact in our community beyond the playing field. I wanted people in my own community to know LT the person, not LT this football player, this guy that you see on game days with this mask on his head and, the passion that he plays with. Yes, that's in one sense, that is who I am. But in another sense, as I mentioned, I want to be considered a humanitarian. So starting a foundation allowed me to dive deep into my own community and serve my own community. And the foundation was started to engage families and promote social and cultural awareness, as well as building positive self-esteem for deserving families. And basically, we built programs to feed people, to educate people, or to give out scholarships to students that are graduating high school and going off to college, and as well as creating, or I should say, having football camps, um, Christmas toy drives, golf tournaments to, um, raise funds for the different programs that we were doing.
Since 2003, how much do you think you've been able to give away, particularly as it relates to scholarships?
Over $300,000 we have given away in scholarships. The thing about that, Michelle, it's something that, again, you just really don't think about the number. Oh, this is what I'm doing, and this number is so important. It's more about the people or the students that are being affected. The high school I went to was 98% minority, half blacks, half Hispanics, less than 2% white. And so the majority of those students do not go to school. They learn a trade so that they can provide for their family. And the first thing that I wanted to do when I got some money was to provide scholarships for my high school. And I started with giving out 25 $1,000 scholarships every single year at my high school.
LT, is there a student that particularly sticks with you regarding how the scholarship actually impacted them?
Oh, Michelle, there are many students. I've received letters from different students from my high school, just expressing the gratification of thank you for allowing me to further my dreams of going to school. And stories like I'm a first generation graduate because I had the LT School is Cool scholarship. Things like that. I would never forget. And this is a little different from the scholarship, but I also, as I mentioned, I did camps, football camps every single summer. And I still do that. It's been over 20 something years we've been doing these football camps. But I remember one of the first camps that we did was in my hometown. And these are not camps that you just learn football skills. We also talk about character and leadership development. So we have a curriculum where we're talking to these kids about character and leadership development. I remember one young man, he was in high school and he was coming up, kind of through the ranks. He was a good little player. And He had came to my camp every single year in high school. Well, come to his last year, coming to my camp, he's going to be a senior. He stands up. I mean, nobody knew he was going to do this. He stands up and he says, I just want to thank the coaches for believing in me. When I first came here, I was so afraid. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I was going to be good enough to participate in this camp, but I just believed. I believed in what the coaches were telling me, and I'm happy to say that I'm receiving a scholarship. It was a major college. It was our first kid who ever did that, and I'll tell you the gratification from that was I knew I had to continue that work because it impacted kids in a tremendous way. And truly, it changes their lives.
There's an opinion about pro athletes, either current or former players, who start foundations and then they have these sports camps. And I think that there is sometimes a rolling of the eyes that I see when I'm talking to my colleagues who about some of the work that colleagues like you and others are doing with sports camps, because they just think, oh, all these guys only do sports camps, they're not doing anything else. Can you help us understand, and I think you just have, but just to iterate it, why a sports camp, number one, is so common for pro athletes who start foundations to sponsor, but then also why it's so valuable that sports camps exist at all, and that that's a worthy support with one's philanthropy?
Well, let me tell you a story. When I was 11 or 12 years old, I struggled, with the belief of, am I good enough? Somewhat, being depressed sometimes. My father wasn't around. At that time, my mom and dad had gotten divorced. And I struggled with, why isn't my dad here? Like, does he not love me? Like, and Michelle, I needed something to grab onto, something that for me that I can run after, or put that goal on the wall and look at it every day and chase it. I needed that so much, but I never knew anybody in my own community or town that made it to the place where I was trying to go, the National Football League. Never, so how do a kid believe that it's possible to do it if he's never seen it, if he's never touched it? Well, I grew up in the Boys and Girls Club. One day, I'm at the Boys and Girls Club running around, and I see on the front desk a flyer of Jay Novacek's football camp for the Dallas Cowboys. But the only name I saw on there was Emmitt Smith, that he was going to be there. Took that flyer home to my mom. I'm 11 years old. Slapped it on her bed. Mom, Emmitt Smith is having a camp. First off, Emmitt Smith is not having a camp. Jay Novacek is having a camp. Emmitt Smith is going to be there. But all I saw,
Right.
Emmitt Smith is having a camp. Mom, I have to go. She looks at the flyer and she sees in my eyes this passion that this little boy has to go to this camp. But it's $250 some dollars. And she said, "Whew, baby, $250, that is a lot of money. I don't know if we can do that." So of course I leave dejected. And fast forward a couple of months later, my mom calls me in her room and she says, "You remember that camp you wanted to go to? Well, I'm gonna take you to it. We're gonna go to that camp." And I was elated. I'm going to a camp where Emmitt Smith, my idol, the person that I idolize, is gonna be there. And I told my Mom, if I can just touch Emmett, if I can just shake his hand, I believe that I can do what he's done. And I get to the camp. This is no lie. This is how God works. The first day I'm at the camp, I'm in the dorm room, getting ready to go to dinner. I go around the corner to go upstairs. Emmitt Smith is coming down the stairs. He runs into me, almost knocks me over. He holds me up and he looks at me. He says, "Kid, you all right?" I said, "Oh my God, you're Emmitt Smith." I was elated and awe, but I touched him. And the confidence, the swagger that I got from just sizing this man up who just looked like an average man. He looked average, but it did so much for me. And fast forward, I went back home with the confidence that I can do anything because I had just met Emmett Smith. That's the impact that I wanted to have when I did my camps. I was hoping that some kid would feel the same way about me and that I would, like do wonders for this kid and their confidence. And then they will go on and soar to a place that they never imagined that they can go. So a lot of times that is the reason why you do camps, just to inspire kids to do something great.
What a that's okay. On to the it's awesome. It's awesome because the reality is that what you're ultimately saying is that it's transformative. It changes people's lives, right? And that you're like, how different would your life be? How different would the students who've received those scholarships be? How different would their lives be had you not ran into this person? But more importantly, had your mom not made it happen? And so it's just awesome to see how transformative football can be, basketball can be, sports can be for kids, but that ultimately you're also identifying and not everybody can afford it. And so you've got these kids who have the capacity and the potential and the desire and the drive to be able to do the thing, run after the thing, have the goal, chase it, because something might be missing in their life. And that's, and the sport and the community and the team and all of it and the character development can fill that void, but if they don't have the money, then they're in a bind.
But here's the other thing, Michelle. We have created scholarships for those kids.
That's
they can write. They can write a letter explaining why they want to be scholarship to the camp. Maybe some hardships that they've been through, and then we scholarship those kids so that they can have an impact as well.
LT, so we've talked about your foundation, but then I was also very excited to hear that you also have an endowment at TCU, or Texas Christian University. And I love endowments because that was my first introduction into philanthropy, was working for the Episcopal Church Foundation's endowment management and plan giving program. And so whenever I hear someone's got an endowment in their back pocket, I'm very excited. And so can you share a little bit about why you decided to have an endowment at TCU and what the endowment actually is doing?
Yeah, so it was something that I always wanted to do at my alma mater. I wanted to have a lasting impact at the university. I am a board of trustee member at the university. And so I just wanted to step up and do something that, could go on for perpetuity. And the Tomlinson's endowment basically, it helps student athletes get career readiness and also development. So life after sports. I thought that was important for me because I was so focused on sports when I was in college that I think I was too focused on sports, that I put all my eggs in one basket, which you shouldn't. You should never do.
Well, it worked out. It worked out.
But see, and that's why I'm saying, Michelle, I think I was on a trajectory by my sophomore year that, God forbid, no injuries, I was going to make it to the National Football League. And so my focus changed a little bit, but that's not every student athlete in college. A lot of times student athletes are thinking about what they're going to do after sports. They're starting to do internships and different things so that they can be career ready whenever they leave the university. And so I thought that was very important that my endowment focus on all 21, 22 sports at TCU, men and women, but so that they can obviously be prepared for life after sports.
Many of our listeners are already in the space of philanthropy, but some of our listeners who are new to the conversation are new to the world of philanthropy. And so I just wanted to explain what an endowment is. Or, LT, do you want to explain what an endowment actually is?
No, you go ahead.
I will happily do it. Yeah. I love an endowment. When I was working for nonprofits in Los Angeles, I created an endowment for a couple of scholarships through working with donors. And so it's a real privilege. And so it wasn't my endowment, it was working with donors to do that. But an endowment, I believe, is a beautiful thing. And so an endowment ultimately is a charitable instrument, which ultimately is, as you said, LT, allows a gift to exist into perpetuity. So what's beautiful about an endowment is that you have sort of a set amount of money, we'll say $1 million, and we call that the principal. And ultimately, the principal is invested with the right team. Hopefully, you have the right team to invest it. And ultimately, what's happening is that the interest income that's being produced off that investment is ultimately what's being utilized in order to fund the other thing. And so when people hear about MIT's or Harvard's or Princeton's, multi-billion dollar endowments, what they're ultimately hearing about is a principal that's been invested. And these institutions like TCU for your endowment is utilizing that interest income to be able to fund the actual thing that the donor, in this case you, actually wants. And what's so beautiful about an endowment when it's properly invested is that the principal is never, hopefully, if you've got the right investment policy the right spending policy, it's usually about 5 or 7%. Is a good number that people usually focus on, that you're only spending about 5 or 7% of that interest income to actually fund the thing. But the principal is what remains intact. And that is why an endowment, to me, and I think to many people, is so beautiful, because ultimately you're always being able to do the thing, because as long as the principal exists, how much you can give out and allocate in one's giving each year for scholarships, for let's say maybe for housing in another institution, for foundations. Many foundations are supported through endowments, whether they're multi-billion dollar endowments or $1 million endowments or less. But ultimately, it is the amount that one can actually allocate. The interest income can vary from year to year, but the principal exists in perpetuity. And so this is like my soapbox, my commercial real quick for endowments, is that I think that endowments are just so awesome that they can transform communities, in particular Black communities that are not so familiar with the endowments. And so bequests are a great example of when someone passes away and they leave someone in their will, leave an institution. And many, as you well know, LT, that churches are predominantly the places that receive the most funds for philanthropy from Black people. If churches began to utilize bequests, plan giving, as a tool for philanthropy, as a culture of philanthropy within their institution, then an endowment is a great, beautiful tool to be able to receive those funds, like TCU did for you, but not through a bequest, thank God. And then that thing exists in perpetuity. So anyway, that's my soapbox about, I think that endowments are awesome. I'm so excited to hear, LT, that you have an endowment at TCU, and that my hope is that our listeners can also start thinking through, hey, you don't have to have $10 million, you don't have to have $100,000, you can have $5,000 or $10,000 to be able to start endowing, using the principal to be invested, and then the interest income that comes from that's the thing that could actually start funding our communities would be awesome.
Well said.
Well said. I hope Episcopal Church Foundation would be proud. But LT, my question to you is, how did you first learn about an endowment?
Being in the position that I'm in, I obviously have financial advisors and CPAs and whatnot, and that conversation came up. And the other thing about it, Michelle, is we always donate to our foundation. Every year, there's a particular amount of money that, we donate to our foundation, because we believe that people care about you donating to your own foundation. How much skin in the game do you have? How much do you actually, care about the programs that you are promoting in your foundation? And I think when you tell people, look, I'm donating money, I'll donate X amount, that I think kind of calms people down in terms of saying, you know what? Yes, I want to give X amount because this person cares so much about what they're doing that they have their own money involved in this particular venture. And so I think it makes people want to give more. And that was just kind of, the endowment was kind of another element of giving.
I have a lot of colleagues who are NFL alums or former players. And one of the conversations that we have is this idea of the role of philanthropy within the NFL alumni community and the current NFL communities or current player community, and the differences in philanthropy or the expressions of philanthropy financially that changes through generations. And so one of the perspectives that I often hear from our colleagues who are NFL alums is that the older the generation or the older the player is, someone who played in the 70s or maybe in the 80s and the 90s, that there tends to be a greater participation of philanthropy financially. And then the younger generations, so either guys who are retiring currently, recently, or are still playing, are not as philanthropic. And so there's this interesting irony of the older generations made less from football because they had contracts that do not represent what's happening right now, and yet they're giving more. And then the younger generations, either the current players or players who are retiring more recently, tend to have made more through their contracts, but are not as philanthropic in their financial giving. And I wondered, one, if you either agree with that assessment, and if you do agree with that assessment, do you have some insight as to why you think that trend is happening?
I think you have to take a look at the dynamics of a locker room today. And so, Michelle, for example, back in 2001, when I first got into the National Football League, there were certain role models and leaders already established on the team that had foundations. They were doing things in the community. And so as a young person, as a young rookie or, young football player coming into the National Football League, you oftentimes saw these veteran players with their own foundations. They were out in the community doing things. They invited you to go to come, to their various respective events, to help out. And I think when you see that coming into the locker room, it puts pressure on you to do the same, to get out and do something, to not just be this football player. Where I think today, when you think about it, so many guys are changing teams, different locker rooms.
Oh, interesting.
Guys are more concerned about their personal well-being, trying to stay in a particular league or on a particular team to make money. And I don't think I felt like it was more family based back when I played. Like, we're a family, this is a team. You do something in the community, I'm come out and support you. If I do something, you come out support me. I don't see the same passion as these young players have today. Now, there are some that's doing it, but not as much as it was when I played. And I believe that's the reason. There's guys are moving around so much and they just don't have, I don't want to say they don't have time. They just don't think about the community aspect as much.
And the community aspect being their own community or the community of the team?
Their own community. Because a lot of times they're only in those particular cities that they play in for a season or
Got it.
half a year, and then they're back home in their own communities. And a lot of, I would say athletes, they don't believe they need to start a foundation nowadays. The charity work that they're able to do through the team, suffice for a lot of these guys, which, I don't agree with that. Every organization and team obviously has a foundation and they have these programs that they have the guys or the players attend throughout the year. And I say all that to say I'm on the selection committee of the Walter Payton Man of the Year. So every year I read through all these bios and things that the players who are up for these awards, what they're doing in their communities. And a lot of times, it's truly, they're just doing charity work, Michelle. They don't have their own foundations. They're just doing, things that the team asks them to do or a cause that's very important to them. They go and spend their time, helping in that particular space. But a lot of times they don't have the foundation, themselves, which is, it's a little odd to me.
Well, what's the distinction that you're making, LT, about just doing charity work versus having their own foundation. For you, what is
The
the
difference?
difference there? Yep.
Yeah, well, I think, when you start a foundation, you are creating an organization that is near and dear to you. Maybe in ways that you have truly been impacted, that you want to raise awareness, maybe raise funds for uh, that particular space, or say it's education or whatever you might particularly care about. Where charity, a lot of times, it's just going and giving your time. You just show up a couple of hours, spend time, with people, and shaking hands and showing up. So it's time versus, maybe skill and money when you have a foundation. I think when you have a foundation, all three of those things, you have to provide. You have to provide a lot of times money, seed money to start the foundation, right? You also have to spend time putting together a board for your foundation. You have to spend time, hiring someone to go out and fundraise for that foundation. And I think there's a lot more involved when you talk about having a foundation rather than just doing charity work. And nothing is wrong with either one. If guys want to just do charity work, that's on them. But I think if you want to take it to another step, take it to another level, I should say, then start your own foundation. And the other thing about starting your foundation is it's legacy driven. You are trying to leave a legacy for your own family.
So that leads me to another question that I often ask our guests, LT, is this question about legacy and what kind of legacy one wants to have within the space of philanthropy. And so for you, what is the legacy that you want to have within philanthropy?
I think just having an impact on people is at the end of the day is, I think it will be part of my legacy, the impact that I've been able to have on people. But the ultimate legacy that I hope is my children continue to serve in the Tomlinson's Touching Lives Foundation and take it further, create more programs, have a bigger impact in their community. That would be, for me, the ultimate legacy that I can leave. And again, it's that last name, Tomlinson's Touching Lives Foundation. That was part of the reason why we decided to name it that. Is we thought about the legacy of the entire family and all of us being able to touch lives.
LT, so there is that criticism, of course, that many people have who are not pro athletes, who will say, well, pro athletes should be doing more, they should be giving more. He just got that multi-million dollar contract. Do you have a perspective on whether he should or should not be giving more than he is financially, I should say?
That's a tough one to get into, Michelle. I mean, because personally, I feel like to much is given, much is required. It's that old, scripture in the Bible, that I've learned since I was just a kid. Like, if to whom much is given, much is required. So that's my philosophy. That's kind of my feelings on, being able to give monetarily. But some guys feel like they don't trust the system that they're given to, that they're going to use it for the right things. I hear that gripe from guys all the time. Well, I don't give, like that because I just don't trust people to do the necessary things with the money that they're supposed to. And then my answer is always, but that's not on you. You do it out the giving, the kindness of your heart. You give out the kindness of your heart, and what they choose to do with it, that's on them. But you gave out the kindness of your heart. So at the end of the day, I think it's a trust factor why guys choose not to give as much as they used to.
Now I'm putting on my fundraiser hat. I used to be in the major giving space. And so, had to raise the largest gifts for our institution. And ultimately, it sounds like part of what some of your colleagues are saying is that it is a trust issue, that is ultimately what impacts why a donor gives or not, why they give, $1 million, why they give $10,000, why they stop giving. And that is fairly common across the country about, do I trust this institution? To me, it sounds like an interesting conversation if one was a fundraiser to have with some of these men who are saying, I don't trust that the money is going to go to the right place or going to be used well, is to be able to say, then let's find you a place where you can trust. There's got to be somewhere in this country or in this world. Or to your point, LT, start your own foundation.
Yes.
You can give to your, you can start your own foundation and you can have the accountability. You can create a board. And this is what I will say, this is why I'm so proud of this podcast, is because, ultimately part of what you've, I think, identified is that you are pro foundation, you are pro, having athletes have foundations, but it can be a scary space. That if you are not someone who knows about endowments, knows about DAFs, knows about how to create a foundation, then it can be really overwhelming to then say, I'm now going to formalize philanthropy. A lot of these guys, not everybody, but a lot of these guys come out of spaces of philanthropy, being able to give to the church, being able to, as one of our colleagues says, someone shakes your hand and then there's $20 in your hand. Like, this is a very Black thing to do. But then to begin to formalize it with an endowment or with a foundation can just be not one's expertise. And so what I often say, and why I'm so proud of this and why I'm so proud that you're on the podcast as well, is that there are communities to support that. And you're my first conversation. You and I talked about APFE, the Association for Black Foundation Executives. We talked about the African American Association for Development Officers. It's Black fundraisers doing awesome things. There's AFP, which is run by Art Taylor, one of our guests, it's 25,000 fundraisers. I say all of this because I think one of the problems in philanthropy, I think, is how siloed it is. That ultimately, there's not a lot of working together. And that was, I think, sector-wide. But I also say within Black philanthropy that there's not a lot of working together across one's lane. So the Black funders, the foundation executives may not be talking to the Black fundraisers, and the Black fundraisers may not be talking to the board of trustees like you, or the athletes like you, or the advisors like others. And so to me, I think where there could be a real opportunity for growth within Black philanthropy, you have athletes who are saying, yeah, I'd give. We'll see. But yeah, I want to give, but I don't trust the people that might receive those funds. Well, that's a fundraiser and that's an institutional issue. And that can be solved by having better relationships with the communities that you can trust. But then at the same time, your recommendation is also start your own foundation. And the response is, I don't even know what you're talking about. What is a foundation? How does one run a board? These are all things that can be, again, foreign. And so I think what our community of listeners, of colleagues can do is start to close that gap. So when an athlete is like, I want to start a foundation, well, the Association for Black Foundation Executives is a great place to find help. I don't know how to fundraise, and I don't like fundraising. Well, AADO is a great place to know that you can find 5,000. I think Birgit, who will be a guest on our show, who started AADO, I think they're at 6,500 now, people of color, fundraisers who would be happy to receive a phone call from any pro athlete who's like, can you fundraise for my foundation? Absolutely. Do you think that there are opportunities that the sector of philanthropy could be more helpful to pro athletes who want to be helpful but don't know how to be helpful?
Absolutely. I think without question, because oftentimes pro athletes are yearning for the resources, someone to reach out to walk them through how to create a foundation, how to start a board. These are things, think about it, Michelle, all of our lives, we play sports. Like we've been those warriors on the field, but our heart a lot of times wants to serve our community. But how do we do that? How do we enter those spaces where we meet fundraisers and different people that can help us realize our dreams of starting a foundation? I think that is the biggest hurdle that athletes can't get over, is finding, how do we get into those spaces? How do I reach out to these individuals? Do I just call them and say, hey, this is LaDainian Tomlinson. I need, someone to help me start a foundation. But those are the concerns of a lot of my friends who are playing in the league.
That is why I think it's so important that you're a part of this conversation of Black philanthropy on this podcast, Black Philanthropy, Our Stories, is because it's not a voice that people are hearing often from. It's a voice people are critical of, right? Well, what are the athletes doing? And more importantly, what are they not doing? And I would say, and it's why I think I was so excited to have you on the podcast. It's because, well, how are we, I say we, with small w, we, I feel very much on the periphery of the we, but how are we engaging these men, predominantly men, at the pro athlete level in a way that helps them instead of criticizes them? And I think you've just said it, we don't even know who to call. Well, then I think the sector, and I'd say the sector being, in this case, Black philanthropy, needs to start figuring out how can we start to close this gap. And I am hopeful that this conversation with you begins to help people start to think there are people who have, number one, capacity to give, a desire to give, and also the visibility to give.
Yeah.
And these guys don't know what they don't know.
That's
and
right.
I'm telling you privately, not so privately, I am tired of watching people with capacity to give who want to be helpful struggle when there is a whole industry that could be helpful. So I thank you, LT, for giving us all, I think, more insight into people want to be helpful, but they need help. And I think that the help can be on the way.
Yeah, and I just thank you for the opportunity, Michelle, because I know you have had various guests, on your podcast that are in different spaces of philanthropy. And as you mentioned, I'm probably the first athlete to talk about philanthropy from my perspective. A lot of times when I partner with somebody, it's really to be a brand ambassador for those companies or those organizations a lot of times, to bring visibility to whatever particular issue we are trying to impact. But at the end of the day, I think we can, as athletes, we can do a better job of putting ourselves out there a little bit more for the things that we care about. Where I'm just going to be honest, I'm being transparent, that hopefully we help somebody. A lot of times, athletes are also afraid that, people are going to want things from them, in terms of money that's not foundation related. And so those are issues throughout, especially with Black athletes. Those are issues that, we talk about a lot of times, where instead of putting yourself out there, you kind of, isolate yourselves from doing different events and going to different charity events because you're so afraid to put yourself out there of not knowing what people are going to ask from you. And that keeps you from doing the things that you want to do, impacting the people that you want to impact. So athletes out there, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and go for it. There, as you mentioned, Michelle, there's many people out there that are willing to help, in different capacities.
It's not lost on, I think, either of us, LT, that a lot of athletes, pro athletes, in this case, you can say either for the NFL or the NBA, being some of the biggest leagues that support, or that I should say are supported by Black men in particular, is that not everybody comes from money. And so I think most players don't come from the levels of money unless their fathers were athletes as well. But even if they were, then that was some time ago before these, huge contracts came out. My point to all of that is to say is that it is overwhelming. It sounds all overwhelming, right? Number one, you started from the beginning. Like I saw Emmitt Smith, and then that changed my life. And now I finally am on this trajectory that everyone says is impossible. In many ways, statistically is impossible. And then you're in the thing and you're in this huge machine in many ways. And then you're given these huge dollars with these fans and with all of these opportunities. And then you're also coming from a place of not having any of this. And you're also 19 or 20 or 21 or 22 or 25. And so I think you identified something that's really important, the fear that could be attached to, I didn't have all this attention 25 years, 15 years ago, so when people are reaching out to me, what do they want from me? They want money from me, they want time, they want, influence. One of my primary goals as the host for this show is that number of, less than 3% of that $5 billion that's given out each year is going to Black communities. And that number can vary depending on what research you're looking at. But ultimately, we're not getting a lot of money. We're giving out a lot of money, but we're also giving out as, a community that is relatively small in the US. And so all of a sudden you've got, half $1 trillion being given out each year, and we're getting less than, we'll say, at least less than 5% of that. We can figure this out, but we can figure it out by being in a relationship with one another. And it's not going to work if people don't trust each other. And part of what's happening is that, you just said it, some of these men don't trust. And that is something that we have to solve. And I think we ultimately solve it through relationships. And it is up to, I think, all of us to be able to find better ways to support one another through relationships. And so one of the things I had suggested recently, I don't know if I said it out loud on the podcast, but I had this vision of being able to have a listening session with our listeners to see how can we be more helpful? How can this podcast be more helpful to you? But let's start thinking some things through so that it's not everyone trying to plug holes in this ship that can feel very much like sinking for Black people individually. And so I would invite you, and I would invite all of our guests that have been on the podcast so far, all of our listeners, and all of our new listeners, because I know we're going to have new listeners just because you're on the show, on how can we start doing what we've been doing for a long time, which is to say loving one another, supporting one another, giving to one another, trusting one another. And I don't have the answer for that, but I do think, LT, that you've been able to identify a real hole on, number one, you've got a bunch of people saying who are not pro athletes, they should be doing something different and doing more. And then you've got pro athletes saying, I don't even trust these people. I don't trust that this money that I'm giving is going to be utilized well. So, okay, well, that needs to be solved pretty quickly because the financial crisis that Black people are in, both personally in their own household income, but also in their nonprofits that are not being supported, and also the high unemployment rates. I think that there are more things that we could do together. What do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to trust one another in order to work together. And I think that's from both sides, right? Meeting in the middle. And yeah, I mean, I think you said it well, Michelle. You really did. The issue that we find ourselves in the Black community. And a lot of times, the reason why, and is probably, I don't want to say bad to say this, but it's the scar tissue a lot of times from Black folks or even athletes that for some reason we always seem to think that someone might not have our best interests in mind. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to kind of get over that part of it. If we truly care about our community and raising each other up and loving one another, then I think that part of it, we should be able to get over it and kind of start to
heal
or bridge that gap, or heal and bridge that gap between one another.
Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't always work out to be able to ask our listeners and our fellow guests to see if they have any questions for our next upcoming guest. But it did work out for you. And so we'll start with our guest, Heather Infantry, who is awesome. She, of course, is heading up Giving Gap. Her question is, how do we, being the larger Black philanthropy community that's not pro-athlete, she says, how do we tap into the pro-athlete community to support Black philanthropy? What are the access channels? Because we need champions.
If you have pro teams in your community, those players are always out doing things in the community, meaning either for the team or for themselves. And I think, there is ways where you can gain access to the player through those events. And I think that's the best way, because it's hard enough trying to reach a pro athlete outside of the sport or outside of a particular event, it's hard to just send them a letter and explain kind of, your goals or hopes of partnering with them. That's hard to do. And speaking from an athlete, a lot of times we have so much fan mail that, you can't get to it all in a particular setting. So it could take months for you to get through all this fan mail. So that's not a particularly good way to do it. And a lot of times these guys are a little bit kind of sheltered, so it's hard to kind of find a connection where you can reach out to them on the phone or whatnot. So I think the best way is trying to um, go to an event or maybe um, support a cause that they care about, in their own particular foundation. I know in the past, I've gotten to meet some incredible donors because they just wanted to support some of the things that I was doing, and I built a relationship with those donors from that.
Connect with them where they're the most accessible, which is when they're in the community. It makes a
Correct.
lot of sense. So our next question comes from our colleague who's a listener as well, and who is the program assistant for the Richard and Susan Smith Foundation. And of course, his name is Fauzi Talabi. So the question that he has for you, LT, of course, is, does LT believe athletes should be more transparent about their philanthropy and giving strategies?
That's a tough one, Michelle, because as we talked about earlier, athletes are targets. And so a lot of times you don't want to say exactly how much you're giving or what that monetary value is per se, because we are targets and people are always looking to, oh, let me fact check them and, kind of put them on blast if they don't have the exact number that they said they had. So athletes are a little hesitant to do that. But I do believe we are obligated to be transparent in terms of the amount of impact that we have had on people. Meaning, if I've had an impact on my community for 15 years in doing certain programs in my community, I want to let that be known. I want people to know about what I'm doing in my community for 15, 20 years. And so, yes, I think it raises the awareness of everybody in that community. But more importantly, the people that care about those particular programs.
One of the things I forgot to mention that he had a sort of a follow-up note to his question, which was ultimately what you've just said. Increased visibility can lead to significant opportunities for the organizations they support that might otherwise go unnoticed. And so it sounds like there's some agreement there between what he's saying and what you're saying, which is to say, when these very visible individuals begin to talk about, to your point, not necessarily the number that they're giving, because that's actually private. I would say as a fundraiser, many a person will say that how much someone goes into their own pocket is their own business. And some people want their name on a building and want everyone to know how much they gave. And some people say, I want to be anonymous. Again, these are private decisions, I personally think. But you have talked about, I think, just said that the impact is really important, because that also, at least talking about the impact, because that can increase the visibility of the impact, one, but also the organization that's being supported.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it. So his next question relates to NIL, name, image, and likeness. Ultimately, college athletes are coming into wealth much earlier, and many are starting their own foundations. Which many, I would love to know what many that is, because I'm not necessarily aware, but he might know and have insights. What advice would you give these future funders regarding what to look out for? And are there any lessons you wished you had known earlier in your career?
I would say to surround yourself by people that are educated in that space, but also people that you trust to do the work. And sometimes that takes time. You have to vet people for an amount of time in order to know if you all align, have the same values, care about the same things, have the same, kind of beliefs, if you will. But I think, and here's the thing, with the younger kids, and so for example, my nephew is, he was part of the NIL kid. You know,
Mm,
he was a standout college athlete. He now is in the National Football League, and
mm,
he's yet to start a foundation. He wants to come support what his uncle is doing, show up for, different events, but he hasn't gotten to the space yet where he wants to create his own foundation.
mm,
And I find myself wondering why. Um, why hasn't he gotten there where, he started making money well before I did. But, at the end of the day, I think you got to give people the time to get to that place on their own. you know,
mhm,
he and we were raised pretty much the same, meaning in the same community, caring about the same people, um, um, like helping people, you know, creating impact the way that our family has always done, but yet and still, he hasn't gotten to the space where he feels comfortable in creating his own foundation. But, I hope in due time he will get there. And I think that just speaks to that generation of kids not having people to trust. So he hasn't built that same type of team around him where people he can trust that are gonna be able to help him start the foundation and do the things that he cares about.
part of what we talked about is, again, can be overwhelming. It can be, a huge leap to be able to create your own foundation and not have the skill set and the infrastructure to be able to do that. And I would say the human infrastructure, the people around one to be
Yeah.
able to help them do that.
I think, Michelle, what needs to happen, especially with college kids in this era of NIL, I think there needs to be maybe a class that's offered, or even if it's not a class, just like a program that's offered to these young student athletes on what it means to start a foundation, to,
Mhm.
to make your money work for you and certain things like that. I think, really there is nothing like that. That's why they don't know. They're
Mhm.
making all this money, but they're not being taught how to start a foundation. So they never even think about that part of it while they're in college, a lot of them.
There's a world in which, someone who is philanthropic, who has an NIL contract, could create their own scholarships while they're at school. They
Yes,
could endow their own professorship chair in school. It's pretty awesome, but again, it's this lack of knowledge, lack of training, and it sounds like to me the big lesson here, I think, is that the sector of philanthropy can be more helpful, because these guys who are, and these women who are 17, 18, 19 years old, I mean, they haven't got their first apartment yet. Usually, it's hard to think about endowing something. One of the things that we talk about, LT, on our podcast that I love to talk about is the failure and mistakes, and the power of failure and mistakes within Black communities. And I would imagine within your own legacy of excellence and being a Hall of Famer, that sometimes there can be a pressure for all of us to be awesome and amazing and not make mistakes. Has there been anything that you have gotten wrong, made a mistake, that you found especially valuable as a lesson for you to make better, different, more informed decisions for you, your family, your business?
I think failure is a part of growth. Um, in fact, I would tell someone if you never fail, then you haven't succeeded,
Hmm.
truly succeeded. Because when you fail, you learn how or what it takes to succeed at the end of the day. And so, sure, most of my mistakes, Michelle, has been um, with people, trusting people or partnering with people
Hmm.
that didn't have the right intentions.
Hmm.
And you learn, that's why I mentioned earlier, you learn maybe how to vet someone a little bit more, how to spend a little bit more time with someone to know their heart and kind of understand their passions and whatnot. Oftentimes, I know I was guilty of this. because I have a good heart. People always tell me, LT, you got such a good heart. And so I always want to see the best in people. And my wife always say, well, you need to see the worst in people too. And so it's like one of those things that I had to, for myself, slow down and not rush the process of, getting to know someone or partnering with someone, doing my due diligence. So yes, to answer your questions, I've made many mistakes. But I also think that has put me in a position now to where I am, where I'm able to succeed in some of those spaces.
Do you have hope right now? Are you feeling hopeful these days, or are you feeling hopeless? And if you do feel hopeful, and we hope that you do, where does that hope come from?
I think it's easy, oftentimes, for us in the midst of all that's going on to feel hopeless. I think that's totally natural. But my strength comes from, I'm reminded of what my ancestors went through. I'm that kid that when I was growing up, our family reunions, which I didn't know at the time, our family reunions were on the slave plantation that my ancestors were once a part of. And I didn't find that out until I was an adult when I went back to that family reunion and I was shown a slave quarters that my family uh, used to live in.
Mm.
I still have that image in my mind. And so my hope is, and here's the other thing, Michelle, I always think about God chose me to take my family name further than it's ever been taken before. Why is that? There's a reason why. So I must continue to run this race, even when I get tired. I have to continue to run it because I know I'm passing it on to my kids one day. But I want them to continue to carry that torch and be inspired by what their mother and father did to carry that torch. So that's why I'm hopeful. Even in the midst where times I feel hopeless, I still have to run that race.
As you're saying that, two images came to mind. Is that I have watched your highlight reels from the NFL, and how fast, so fast, so fast, and then how fast you ran both horizontally and vertically, and how you just seemed to fly like you were born to fly. And I wondered if your desire to run this race contributed to how fast you ran, even when you were in the NFL. If you had some sort of driver that required that you were as fast as you were.
Yeah, it did. Absolutely. I don't think it's by chance, because prophecy came on my life at 14. I mean, it was when I heard the prophecy. And it said, God will take you places you never imagined if you continue to honor him and give him all the glory and praise. And if you think about my story coming from a place that no one has ever made it to the National Football League, to me being who I became and, this transcendent player, I feel like, it was God pushing me a lot of times. I can't explain a lot of times when people ask me, how did I do something? I can't explain it. I just did it. But it was God ushering me and pushing me to the place where he wanted me to be. So yes, I absolutely believe that. And here's the other thing, Michelle, that this is how I know that God has given me favor. I've never had a surgery from all the years and hits that I've taken from football. I don't know one other person that can say that played the position that I played. Most guys are beat up. They've been cut on 5, 6 times with surgery. But yet and still, God has given me grace that I can say I've never had surgery or been cut on. I don't have ailing injuries. So you tell B.
LT, we're so grateful for you. I express gratitude for you trusting us to help tell your philanthropic story and for being a part of our community. LT, how can people stay connected to you?
Yeah, so they can connect with me through my social media, Instagram, LT_21 official. You could just send me a message through there. I'm mostly always on Instagram. That would be the best way.
Awesome. You're our first guest minus Brianna Rogers, who gives out their Instagram. Everybody else gives out their LinkedIn. And I just thought that was so sweet that, and I looked at your LinkedIn recently. I was like, oh, it's not much happening here. And so I appreciate that you are in that IG space. It is a space that I don't understand, but I appreciate that you do. And as we're wrapping up today, LT, is there anything else that you want to share before we scram today?
I would just say thank you so much, Michelle, for doing this work. I recall, when it was first brought to me that you wanted to do this, I had to kind of dive into this world of what truly, I always just did philanthropy, right? I just did it because it was what was in my heart and really didn't think about the different spaces and, different capacities that there are in philanthropy. But because of you, I've been able to really kind of dive into it and see what's important to people and why this space is so important, especially Black philanthropy. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, Michelle, you have re-energized me to go back and kind of dive back into this work even more to impact more people. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, LT. What a privilege to do this. I'm so grateful. And I will say that I do think that philanthropy, as Black people know it, and have been doing it for a long time, is the answer. I think that, for all the challenges that we're having, that the answer is not out there. I will keep on saying that the answer is right here, that you are the answer. I am the answer. Our listeners are the answer. And I am excited for more people within the sector of philanthropy to have a better understanding of what philanthropy can look like through pro athletes like yourself. And at the same time, I'm very grateful that your own example of what philanthropy looks like as a pro athlete and a father and a son also can inspire a new generation of philanthropy of pro athletes. And so, the one question that I often ask, but I didn't ask you because you already answered it, sort of why now, right? Why you now and not you 100 years from now or 100 years ago? And that you have, as you've said, a calling on your life, that there's favor on your life. For me, this podcast is a why me, why now, among other things. I'm a filmmaker. I'm and understand it as one of my ministries on the planet to be able to transform how people think about our enslaved ancestors, yours included, through film. And so I'm really proud to do that work. But I also think that this podcast, I stumbled upon it, did it because I was lonely, and to create community, is also a why me or why us right now, because I think that there is something happening in the space of Black philanthropy in particular, and that Black leaders all over the country, whether they are known or not known, whether they have a LinkedIn page or an IG page or not, and most people don't, are starting to come together in ways that, as one of my colleagues said, I'm almost afraid to say it out loud, that she's a part of one of the biggest foundations in the world. And she said, I'm so grateful for you, Michelle, for calling this podcast Black Philanthropy, to have the courage to call it Black Philanthropy. And I was like, well, what courage? What's the courage? Is what it is. She's like, because they used to kill us for this. Like, oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
They used to kill us for this.
Yeah.
And, okay. So sometimes with the chaos that's happening, out in the world, sometimes there is a little bit of fear of doing this work. But I also recognize, like you said, we came from enslaved people. I'm a Jackson because James Jackson Sr. owned a plantation in West Feliciana, Louisiana. It's not deeper than that. He bought somebody and then he had a child with her.
Yeah.
Not her choice. And so you still bear certain names. I still bear certain names. And I'm not interested in being afraid to live this life on behalf of our ancestors, yours, mine, the Samuels, the Murrays, the Polks, the Armsteads, the Jacksons, the Tomlinsons. We come from such amazing people. And I just thank you for being one of those people who's amazing, who's living that legacy, and that we don't have to be afraid to honor the legacies that we come from, the people who survived for us to be here. So thank you for the privilege of introducing you to so many people in this sector, but then also to help invigorating you in this place. It's awesome. This work is awesome, and you're awesome. Thank you for being a part of it, LT.
Thank you, Michelle.